The king is dead. Long live the king. Last night we had the nerfs go live during our live stream, bringing Zabu and Silver Surfer into a more fair realm of gameplay. As a result, most Marvel Snap players are already out there asking, hey, what are the best decks now? What are we supposed to play? And more importantly, just how good is Modok in the current format? Today, we're going to be taking a look at the early performers of Modok decks since the card was released in the Battle Pass, kind of give you an idea of the different directions in which Modok is currently being pushed on the first day of play, how those are going to be refined in the future, and most importantly, which of these archetypes stand the best chance to be relevant in the long run in the future. If you enjoy this type of content, all you got to do is let me know. Leave a comment down below in the comments section. Let us know what you're thinking about Modok so far. Make sure to like the video for us as well and subscribe while you're down there to keep the YouTube gods happy. Make sure you're not missing out on any content coming out of Marvel Snap Zone over here on YouTube. With all that said, let's get started. We've got some very prominent decks to take a look at. We'll start things off with this very, very sweet kind of Modok combo ramp deck. If you want some gameplay of this one or a more detailed breakdown, we actually did a dedicated video on it just a few days ago. I highly recommend you going and checking out. But this deck is built to kind of facilitate both the downsides of a ramp strategy and a Modok combo deck by slotting them together. If you've not seen it already, Invisible Woman allows you to do some very crazy things with Modok as a card. Playing it on turn 2, 3 or 4 and hiding Modok behind it means you can then hide Hela behind that and then discard your entire hand and revive it all in one big flash on the final turn of the game. You'll be seeing a lot of that 3-card punch moving forward, as it should be very popular when it comes to Modok being played. However, that combination is very fragile. You can interact in a number of ways, such as Cosmo, Aero, or similar. Many ways of getting involved and stopping that one. So this deck looks to facilitate that by playing a backup plan. You are a ramp deck first with this combo baked in to allow some high rolls a little bit later on. We're looking to use the power of Electro and Wave here in order to facilitate early Modoks and Hellas, but also early Captain Marvels, early Magnetos and Doctor Dooms, just cards that are good on rate and you're more than happy to accelerate out in the average traditional ramp deck. Black Cat makes an appearance in here to give you another thing worth reviving with Hela should you not find your Modok later in the game. It makes it a little more easy if you pull Hela off of Jubilee, for example, in the mid game. Great deck, been really impressed by this one so far. I think this original list comes from Jeff Hoogland and we had a lot of fun playing it on the broadcast when we did. Really looking forward to seeing how this one evolves in the future moving forward. Another popular version of Modok at the moment revolves around being as greedy as humanly possible with this Lockjaw style Modok deck. You might notice that outside of Colleen, Wing and Swarm, the curve for this deck starts at 3 and then doesn't stop at 3. Just all the 4s, all the 6s as we go all the way up the game. Game plan here is really simple. We're going to look to use Lockjaw alongside some free copies of Swarm to just cheat on our energy. Play cards much sooner than we had the ability to do so, with powerhouses like Dracula often discarding Infinite late in the game, Magneto being incredible early and pulling problematic Cosmos out of the way, and more importantly, Modok activating multiple copies of Swarm to go alongside Lockjaw on the final turn of the game to turbocharge your copy of Hela or turbocharge your Apocalypse. This deck is the definition of greed and will be retreating very often when its early hands don't come together, but when things work, oh boy will they work, and you will often put way more power and much bigger cards into play than any other deck in Marvel Snap. Possibly the most common variation of Modok right now is this kind of mixture of the above. The basic discard Lockjaw archetype was the obvious place to start when testing Modok, and it didn't disappoint. This particular list that you see on screen was shared by Griffin Bennett, and I believe it's among the most popular builds currently out there on the ladder, and likely one that stands to shine now that Zabu and Silver Surfer have been dialed back slightly. Thanks to new cards, Morbius gets big really fast, and the Collector has made its way back into the deck to pair very well with Swarm. Together, those should be able to challenge a lane, while Dracula can take care of a second one through discarding Apocalypse on the final turn of the game. The reason both cards are growing to such humongous amounts of points when they weren't before, is thanks to the relationship between Modok and Swarm, allowing both Morbius to have tons of discards that it probably didn't before, and the Collector to have many cards coming back to its hand all in one go. So far, without the help of positive locations, Morbius should routinely be able to grow past the 10 power mark, and that's quite a powerful 2-cost card, making it the best in the game if everything goes to plan. The Collector is a tad weaker, but should often grow to double digits sometimes when played on turn 2, making it an acceptable inclusion as a backup Morbius if you like. In addition to both of these cards being big point contributors, their power remaining unknown for the opponent until the final turn of the game makes them very special. Modok on turn 5, or sometimes even turn 6, isn't so simple for the opponent to evaluate or visualize, giving this deck some incredible unpredictability. Outside of this new interaction with both Morbius and the Collector, Modok can be considered the best discard effect in the deck all around. The card makes sure we discard whatever it is that we really want to discard, but also that Apocalypse is alone by itself in our hand at the end of the game, ready for Dracula to take all of its power, alongside providing swarms to us to use with Lockjaw on turn number 6. As a downside, however, this deck is the least flexible of the bunch. It's not good into various locations, and sometimes it will lock it out of its ability to play the game properly as a result. It also has a very firm point ceiling throughout the game with Modok joining the game, but the lingering problem of not being flexible is still here and still hurting this deck. So I look forward to, I should say, to seeing how this one evolves over time, and if there's any way that we can fix that. If you want to talk about maximum high roll, however, traditional Hela discard got a turbocharge from this card being released, letting us do all kinds of crazy things with Invisible Woman. Playing Modok behind Invisible Woman, as explained before, and then Hela on turn 6, just lets you fire off all kinds of fireworks. It's so simple that even if your opponent probably figured it out, and they will disrupt that play pattern, I promise you, they might not be able to do anything about it over the course of the game. As such, Hela couldn't simply rely on being the sole combo in the deck in order to win games, leading to Lockjaw being included in this deck as well, to add another way to pull it off. If you don't have Hela in hand, you can safely play Modok, and then use the swarms generated to fetch your deck and find Hela on turn number 6. Once again, we can see Morbius making an appearance here. The card is just too strong to not include inside a deck that contains Modok. However, the Collector doesn't make the cut here. It is just not enough in terms of raw power, but Helicarrier does. Considering we aren't playing Apocalypse in this deck, Modok often leaves us empty-handed after it activates, and we don't always draw into Hela on the next turn of the game. Helicarrier offers us another way of playing on turn 6, and also allows some cards to throw behind Lockjaw if we didn't find Swarm at any point during the game. As a side bonus, the card it generates can sometimes save Hela from being discarded by a Hellcow, which acts as a mini Modok in this deck in a pinch. Obviously, Hela discard is a high roll based style strategy, meaning the game plan is not always going to be as smooth as some of the other decks we've already looked at. You should anticipate retreating more, but Hela does allow you to reach all locations when she summons cards back into play, which give you a little bit of a bonus compared to the less flexible archetypes you've seen so far. One of the more skeptical lists going forward is going to be the Zabu versions of Modok. We've seen a few of these flying around, courtesy of players like Raven over on Twitter, but following the nerf, there's a good chance this deck just cannot compete anymore, as the 4-cost cards will not be cheap enough to be played alongside other cards. Zabu, however, is still a very powerful card and does facilitate playing a number of 4-cost cards to make it a powerful inclusion. Shuri is simply a great card and can make your Modok have 16 power, which is enough to contest most lanes by itself. Wong obviously synergizes with our discards and makes Modok go absolutely nuts on our hand, generating 4 swarms and buffing Apocalypse twice. Lastly, Mystique here can copy Morbius, which is already enough to make the card appealing, but it can also duplicate Wong's ability to unlock a new realm of discard possibilities. Overall, this deck feels like the Lockjaw Dracula archetype with fewer discards, but much more support and, on average, good cards. Mainly the 3-cost cards have disappeared to facilitate the addition of Zabu, so no Swordmaster, Moon Knight or Lady Sif in this one. This obviously hurts the reliability quite a lot, but one could be enough to make up for that in terms of raw high roll potential, and to be fair, Modok does power up Morbius the Collector and Apocalypse all by itself. I don't expect this version of the deck to survive the most recent Zabu nerf, but Shuri and Wong are, very, very strong cards. The question will very much remain as to if they are too expensive when you don't have access to Zabu's insane reduction abilities. Until then, we got to test this one and see where it lands following the most recent changes. Most importantly of all, there are a great selection of budget choices for you if you want to play with your brand new Modok, but maybe are still in Series 2 or early Series 3. You'll find a number of players exploring lists that look closer to old beta builds if they want to abuse the card in that stage of the game. They haven't necessarily made it to the most popular builds yet, but Swarm is a very powerful card alongside Modok, and we can kind of abuse that synergy by including cards like Okoye and Nakia to really milk it for all it's worth. I don't really know what could be removed from other archetypes to make space for Nakia and Swarm, so it kind of makes sense that this kind of fits by itself and doesn't really go into any of the other discard decks alongside Okoye, so we'll give them their own deck for now. This is a budget version that I've seen where Okoye and Nakia make a lot of sense for touching Swarm and making it get much, much larger, but also the curve here is quite low, so you should be able to manipulate your hand to get Swarm into the left for Nakia's buff fairly often. Other similar lists have been included and seen out in the wild, including cards such as Apocalypse and Moon Girl to make more copies of Swarm. These two will often replace Bishop and Strong Guy to create a higher curve in the deck and allow you to include the Collector like you've seen in some other builds as well. Dara JN, I believe it was, played a very similar idea to this with some Series 3 and 4 cards included, including Colleen Wing and Helicarrier to help support Swarm and the Collector. So if you like the idea of using Okoye and Nakia alongside Swarm, you don't just have to be a Pool 2 player, there is definitely some framework for you to look at here. With 6 different ideas already roaming around the ladder of Marvel Snap, I think it's safe to say Modok is a appealing and rather strong card for now. I do not expect all these decks to stay relevant in the long run. The freshness of the card obviously boosts its popularity, especially following the most recent nerfs and changes to its previous season pass brethren. If Hela or Dracula were to come back into competitive relevancy, however, all the discard aficionados are going to be very glad, and Modok might be the one to thank for exactly that. It's hard to say which of these decks I think is the best overall. Some archetypes, including the Dracula-based ones, are strong when the thing that matters most is the number of points they can develop, while others, like the Hela-based ones, pack more flexibility and aren't annoyed by tricky locations anywhere near as much. The best way to look at it for now is to be happy that there are several decks available and you can find one that suits your style the most to start working on moving forward. Hopefully the discard synergy is back for real and can finally make a comeback on our tier list, as it's been locked in tier 4 for a large part of January. To find out, come back to our next installment of the tier list early next week, after we've got a little more information about the most recent balance changes. But until then, you can of course find the whole Marvel Snap Zone crew over on Discord, in our community Discord server if you prefer, or come and find us personally over on Twitter at Marvel Snap Zone, then CCG, or HowlingMines. But until next time, I have been HowlingMines, you've been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care. You have a good one.